There is no doubt we are facing a planetary catastrophe. No serious scientist doubts the facts of climate change. The latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change predicts that on current levels of emission, global warming will be 4.5 degrees Celsius. The goal is to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The question is not whether there is a sustainable capitalism, but whether capitalism as a whole is sustainable. Capitalism is predicated on infinite growth, but the planet is finite. Yet the problem is, can we envisage any alternative to capitalism? This is not a matter of scientific facts alone, but our political and ethical beliefs and values. Mark Fisher, in his book Capitalist Realism, writes that it is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. Why is it impossible for us to imagine the end of capitalism? In a small unpublished fragment, Capitalism as Religion, Walter Benjamin argues against Max Weber that capitalism isn't just conditioned by religion, but functions as a religion. It is a religion without theology and dogma, but it has its own rituals. Its God is money. Rather than atoning for guilt, like every other religion, it makes guilt universal. In German, the word for guilt and debt is the same, die Schuld. Perhaps we cannot imagine an alternative to capitalism because it has become our new religion. One way to understand Benjamin's comparison of money with God in capitalism is through Feuerbach's book Essence of Christianity. Feuerbach argued that God was nothing more than the human subject, objectified. Perhaps money is nothing more than the capitalist subject, objectified. Just as in the past we understood ourselves through God, now we must understand ourselves through money. Yet, if we did understand ourselves through God, Feuerbach argues, we also alienated ourselves from ourselves. If God was true love and true justice, then we could never truly embody these. There are three moments in the essence of Christianity: externalization, objectification, and alienation. Our understanding of Benjamin's fragment is that capital as money is also an externalization, objectification, and alienation. So much so that we imagine money, as we used to God, as the miraculous origin of everything, including ourselves. First of all, we need to understand capitalism, even if only in the most basic way. There are two ways to understand capitalism. First of all, abstractly, as The Economist does. And then secondly, historically, as a dynamic and changing system. Only in the second way can we understand how capitalism functions like a religion and shapes us as individuals. Let us first look at how The Economist understands capitalism in the most basic way possible. Imagine that you wanted to produce potatoes. You will need land, seeds, and tools. These are my capital. Capital, in the simplest sense, is an asset that produces future value. Let us say I invest £1 million in my farm, and that the value of the potatoes I sold in 1 year was £100,000. From part of that income, I will have to pay for my labour. My labour costs are £50,000. From a quick calculation then, I received a 5% return on my capital. Notice, and this will be an important fact later, that labor is counted as a cost and not as an asset in this model. Capitalism, however, does not just exist in economic models, however basic the models are, but is an historical and social relation. And for this, we need a more complicated definition. Paul Bowles, in his book Capitalism, defines it as the private ownership of assets, the existence of a market where goods and services are bought and sold, and finally, where the profit motive is the driving force. As an historical phenomenon, we can think of capitalism going through various stages. As a world economy, Wallerstein argues, capitalism emerges in the 16th century. The first form of capitalism was not industrial, but agricultural. It was this agricultural capitalism that formed the basis of the industrial capitalism in the 18th century. We are now in the third stage of capitalism, which is financialization. As capitalism changes its form, this does not mean that the other sectors vanish. Rather, they too are transformed. Agriculture becomes industrialized. Industry becomes financialized. Just as capitalism changes its form, it also changes its locale. What was once the center or core of capitalism becomes its periphery. Capital moves from Venice to Amsterdam to London to New York and maybe today to Shanghai. Capital is never homogeneously shared throughout the world. There is always the core and the periphery of capital. So far, we have only talked about capital in terms of assets. As we pointed out in the very basic economic model of capital, labor is a cost and not an asset. What is the relation between labor and capital? Before we look at this relation, especially how it appears in the third form of capitalism as financialization, we will investigate in the next lecture the nature of money.